Hello, sir.
Hey, good afternoon.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, you too, Evan. Appreciate you giving me a call out of the blue, and here we are doing a little Zoom podcast here and talking about things that are very important to the country for sure.
Making it happen. We're making it
Yes.
happen. We had a great conversation actually before this, and it inspired even more to chat about today.
Yep.
We covered a lot of good topics. And tell me a little bit about yourself, and
Okay.
and let's get started with that. So people know who we're talking to here. The Kyle Biedermann, state
Yes.
rep of Texas.
State representative in Texas for six years, and Texas only meets every other year. So we only meet for 6 months every other year. So basically, three sessions over 6 years, with some special sessions in between. But that was just what I did the last 6 years. I've been an Ace hardware dealer for 38 years. So basically, I'm an Ace hardware dealer that was never in politics, never went to a political meeting in my entire life. And I decided to run for office, came out of nowhere, and I won. And my whole platform was I'm an Ace hardware dealer. I'm not a politician. Never was, never plan on being, but I'm an Ace hardware dealer. And so that's where I got my credibility, service, honesty, hard work, and it paid off, and I won. And so I decided to not run again. 6 years was enough. I'm a term limit guy. In fact, I put the only term limit bill out in Texas, and so I just follow what I said I was going to do, and now I'm back at my Ace Hardware store. In fact, that's where I am right now.
You are at the Ace Hardware store at this moment.
That's correct. And I live in Fredericksburg, Texas, in the Hill Country, beautiful town. And actually, I moved to Fredericksburg from Southern California. I was there for 3 years, a financial advisor down by John Wayne Airport. And my parents decided to move to Texas, and I didn't. I didn't really want to move, but they asked if I would come, and they bought me a ticket to check out this beautiful place in Texas that I'd never heard of. And when I came and saw it, I said, "Hey, I'll give it a try." So I packed up, gave my book of business to my desk mate, and left California and moved to Fredericksburg, Texas, small town in the middle of the Hill Country.
Wow. And you're from New York originally, which is actually where I'm from. We grew up about 20 minutes apart or so, right?
That's correct. That's correct. It's Long Island. I grew up with a Texas mother. So that was, I didn't realize how special that really was until I got older. But having a Texas mother was very, very beneficial because, you learn about friendliness. You learn about, being neighborly, and, being a German in Long Island, all we did is work. All my family did was work. My mother's family loved each other. So they spent a lot of time with each other. So I'm glad I got to see that side of family life besides just the hardworking Germans. There's nothing against them, but they're just hardworking Germans. Yep.
Yeah. Well, we know from New York, there's a whole bunch of delicatessens.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which I believe is a German word.
Yeah, it might be. I miss all the hard rolls, and I miss the pizza, and I miss a lot of the other stuff from New York. But I'm glad to be in Texas.
That's good. Well, being in Texas has given you a unique perspective. You are a Republican state rep, right?
That's correct. And if as I said, I never went to a political meeting, so I didn't really know what I was. I just voted, and I, being a Christian, also, most of my friends voted Republican, so I voted Republican. But I really didn't know that much about the Republican Party, what they stood for, and certainly not that much about how politics work. So yes, I consider myself more of a conservative Christian than I do a Republican, because I fought against our Republican leadership the whole time I was in the state capitol. That was I just want to do what's right for the people, and it doesn't matter what party it is. It's all about the policy. It's all about values and principles and freedom and liberty. That's where I stand.
Yeah, and one of the things that we discussed, which I found was super interesting, is the concept of church and state. Right. This was this
Mhm.
came up in our last conversation, and I thought it would be worth revisiting the
Sure.
reality of what that means exactly, to have the separation of church and state. It seems like it's something that is part of many years of conversation and the Constitution, but to what degree and to what does it really mean, and how do people interpret it, and where do you stand on that, and yeah.
Sure. Well, I learned a lot about the separation of church and state before I got into politics. And a lot of it just came because being a Christian, all these attacks that the church should not be involved in politics or should not be involved in the government, which is such a foreign idea going back in history. It always has been. And then, of course, our Constitution and our founding fathers, much of their belief system and the writings and the books that they read that led them to write the Constitution came from a Christian background, not a certain religious background, but a Christian background. And so when they wrote the Constitution, there was never a mention of separation of church and state. In fact, it was all about there is no state without Christianity. And so, but not a certain religion. And they made sure, especially in the First Amendment, that there could never be a state religion or that there would be any religion that would be forced upon the people from the government. Freedom of religion. So if you have freedom of religion, how could there be a separation? And so the term separation of church and state is not found in the founding fathers' writings or in the Constitution. It basically became an issue in the 60s when they wanted to use it as a wedge or as a way to keep Christianity out of society. And of course, we took God out of the church, out of the schools. We've taken God out of society in so many ways. And this was just part of it. And so it's just a great sounding thing, separation of church and state. It sounds like, yeah, that should be. But it's it means different things to different people.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I would imagine that many people believe it is written in the Constitution.
That's right. It's
So
assumed,
that's a myth,
right?
is what you're suggesting.
Well, I mean, that's proven. So it's no,
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
in the Constitution. It's a myth that people that it is, but
right.
it's not in writing anywhere in terms of policy writing.
That's correct.
So, but it is something people say, and it has become I guess, a societal. I want to say it's a colloquial thing. It's
Mhm.
become a norm in conversation. It's become a norm, almost a philosophical norm in conversation, at least to say it. Now, but the reality is that, and I find this as well. It seems impossible to truly set, because religion gives you values. Whatever religion you are, doesn't matter.
Right.
Right. You say Christian, but I know we've spoken it. What we're really talking about is the faith-based practice
Mhm.
that offers a set of values
Right. And the freedom to practice.
and the freedom to practice that. So,
Right.
so, and how do you separate that from the way you think about what people need and the way that you need to govern? And to me, it feels really, really hard. And what are you saying? To some degree, it's impossible? Are you saying that people just don't do it?
Once you try to separate church and state, then you're putting the state in the position of helping people, providing needs that the church had done for thousands of years. And so once you flip that around, now we're dependent on the government to do the welfare, the mercy, the caring, the helping, the loving of people. So now the church is like, well, you want a separation of church and state? Okay, great. We don't have to do those things. The government's, that's what they're supposed to do because you've separated us out. And we've become so dependent on the government versus dependent upon our neighbors, depending upon our community. And a lot of that's depending upon our church. And so when you start tearing down or minimizing the effectiveness and the power and the goodness of the church as a whole, and replace that with a government which is, has no values, has no morals, now it's a free for all. And it's unfortunate. It's easy just to say, okay, let the government do that. So then everything's all about raising money and the government deciding who gets what. And a lot of people get left out.
Yeah. And it's interesting. If you don't have a foundation of morals, then you rely on policy and your thought and what you read and hear about policy and politics.
It's interesting
to govern how you think, right? This becomes your religion, essentially.
See, that's a good part. It becomes your religion. But again, who makes that decision now? Where is the standard for the decision of policy when the government does it? And it has nothing to do with church and state now, just policy. Who makes the policy? Who writes the policy? And who enforces the policy? And where did the policy come from? It comes from legislators, for the most part. But where does that policy come from? Where do the legislators get it from? They don't really get it from the people. They get it from special interest groups, activists, lobbyists, corporations. It comes from money, and they're influenced. And so our policy is not really coming organically from the people. It's coming more and more from the powerful.
Right. Well, so what do we have to do to? Is it something we need to accept? Are we trying to say that? Well, separation of church and state is a myth. We do need to accept that, and we need to further create a set of standards around what we need around values. I mean, there is the work of Jonathan Haidt. Talks about moral foundations. He writes in his book called The Righteous Mind, which is a wonderful read, and it's beautiful. And it talks about how the left and the right basically come from different moral foundations, and they're all good. These moral foundations are all good in their intent, right? But there's an imbalance between the way that each of them think. They're both lean in certain directions, and I'm wondering if we understood that better, what people's values were, and to get them to see that there is a set of values that we all believe. That doesn't make people bad people because they believe in different things or have different values. That doesn't mean they don't want a safe place for their kids to go to school.
Sure. Well, what happens is, you were talking about one side has certain values when it comes to Christianity or whatever. And again, we're usually talking about Democrat, Republican, whatever. You read the letters of anybody from any background in the Civil War, Revolutionary War, World War II. It didn't matter if you were Democrat, Republican, or Democrat president, prayed, had prayers, said prayers, actually gave prayers in the Bible and Bible verses to the soldiers. FDR. So that wasn't the case back then. Everybody had a set standard. Now, whether you wanted to, how far you went with it, that was, it's always your personal choice. But it wasn't a left or a right. It's only become a left or a right issue because the special interest groups and the activists have come in and taken it on and use that policy or use those standards to separate people again or to gain power. And again, that's where that came from. It never used to be that way, but it's certainly that way right now. When you look at the platform of the Democrat Party, you look at the platform of the Republican Party, they're total opposites when it comes to God and lots of other things. But that was not the case 50 or 60 years ago. Certainly during World War II, it's very clear that was not the case.
Yeah, so what do you think we need to do to align, at least in an understanding? Is this what, do you believe people just need to accept what you're saying in a sense? Do you believe that we can find a solution to this? Because this is probably one of the biggest reasons of why there's so much animosity. There's a lack of perspective. There's a feeling that everyone else is corrupt, right? This is like the politics thing, right? They're evil, we're right, the other people are corrupt. Whatever we're saying is the truth based on whatever headline you read. And we end up not really understanding each other, seeing eye to eye. And how do we start fixing this?
Well, I think we had a good example 2 weeks ago in the National Football League. Here's a player basically died on the field. What did the players do? What did the people in the stands do? What did the people watching do? I mean, there were prayers. They went right to God. It didn't matter if you were Republican, Democrat, whether you ever went to church in your life. It didn't matter anything. It's in us because God made each one of us. So his word, whether you know it or not, is in you. And so what did we do? It rarely ever happens, but it was totally accepted. It brought people together around one thing. We've got to pray for this man because that's the only hope we have. And of course, then we forget that. But look how this country rallied around that. And it wasn't a religion. It wasn't all this, trying to bash people. It was just, hey, recognizing where we came from, who's in charge, and where do you go when you have no place else to go? And when we're not in that position, then we do whatever we want to do because then we think we're all powerful.
Yeah, we seem to come together under these extreme circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, as you're speaking, I'm in the back of my head, I'm thinking, you're using the word God. And I would say that, in the Southern California neck of the woods, one of the common words that people refer to an ethereal, all-powerful being
Mm-hmm.
is the universe. There's a lot of faith here. People like to think they don't have a lot of faith, but there's a lot of faith. They talk in terms of universe and energy and spirituality. There's a heavy spirituality, but they've removed the writings, in a sense, of the Bible as part of that guides it,
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe there's any less faith, funny enough. And at least from my conversations, they've just swapped words and don't refer to the same things, and then have a little bit of a different, deviation in how important certain values are. But I wonder if we started aligning, and one of the things that I talk about is our lexicon. If we started speaking in the same way, let's just say that people on the left don't like using the term God, but they like using the term universe. That just relates to them more. Sure.
But the point is, what does that mean? There's no standard in the universe. There's no nothing. Your universe can be different than my universe and everyone's universe. So everyone can have their own universe. And then again, there is no standard that we can live by because everyone's got their own universe. And of course, everyone's universe is better than your universe. So there is no unity in that whatsoever.
Right. I think what it is when people speak of God from a Christian sense, it wraps itself in this whole other collection of things. This book, Jesus Christ, right? There's like a whole Mother Mary, all those stories come with it, kind of when we speak of God and Christianity. But maybe what we're trying to say is we're talking about a set of values that religion often offers, an underlying set of values. And I'm wondering how we can start seeing that eye to eye, because I don't think that it doesn't exist here. I think it's different. And sometimes it's almost like I could see people even there's like a defensiveness about it. It's like their past and their history, and they used to be Christians and now they realize they don't want to be Christians. They're in California. And I'm trying, like, maybe if part of that, the conversation of faith, of why faith and values and fundamentals are important, but we don't necessarily talk about it in a Christian sense. We talk about it in a universal sense. Maybe that would help.
Well, I know what you're saying, but California, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't know where you get the feeling that California is not, very Christian or whatever it might be. I moved to California when I drove from New York. I drove cross country to go to this job in California. Didn't know anybody really there. And I started driving in California and I saw billboard signs. And it wasn't God. The billboard sign said Jesus. And I'm like,
oh yeah,
what is this? I mean, I thought God was all it was. I really wasn't a Christian at the time. So I'm seeing this stuff. I'm going, wow, this is weird. So I actually got saved in California, and the churches were amazing. I mean, California is an amazing place. So you've got all of that, but you also have a lot of, free thinkers that don't want to do that. You got to remember, California is not as old as the Northeast or even the South. California is a much newer state, and not that it was that new, but the people that moved and when it grew so fast, it was basically people getting away from their family or getting away from the culture where they were to this beautiful, amazing, free, gorgeous place. And so you had a lot of people that didn't, they just started a new life in California. So California has that attitude. Things start there. People are doing different things there because they don't have as deep and long of that cultural background and baggage that they have in the Bible Belt or the Northeast or Midwest.
Yeah.
And so California is a very special place because of that. But so there really isn't. There's a huge, strong Christian community in California. I mean, it's probably the strongest in the whole country.
It's just serious. I suppose we don't. And the reason is speaking about it in terms like it's totally there and it totally exists, but it doesn't seem to exist in the sense that it exists in Texas from a political headline standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's not here. It's plenty. And it's in Santa Monica and Los Angeles and San Francisco and all the places that are, leading a lot of the initiatives that it may even be controversial. It's in there, but it doesn't come out at the end of the policy conversations.
See, that's a great point. Why is that? Okay. So it's pretty, I feel it's pretty simple why that's the case. All right, for me, I'm in Texas. I'm a conservative. I can't get my message out to the public because the media doesn't want to hear what I have to say. And they certainly don't want to help promote my feelings, my values, my principles, my policies, my bills. They don't want to hear from me. And this is Texas. Now you go to California. What are you going to hear in California? I mean, I'm talking about the masses. They're going to hear what they hear on TV, the mainstream media, what you're going to hear in social media, what you're going to hear from Facebook. And we've heard some of the stuff that they've done on how biased they are on things. So that's what people are getting. So you don't hear things like what I'm saying because you're not going to hear those things unless you seek them out. And it's very hard to seek out information nowadays because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much botting and all that kind of stuff. I don't even know what the terms of that stuff, but all I know is the information that's coming out right now, even even on the Republican side or the conservative side or the right-wing side, I mean, there's weird wackos there putting stuff out, and there's like you think that that's supposedly true because you figure, oh, they're Republicans or whatever, but misinformation is coming out from everywhere now.
Yeah.
But the problem is that's what the mass of the people hear. They don't hear these other things because you've taken it out of the school. That's the other thing. So in school, you can't talk about God. You can't talk about any of that. So what has this whole last 2 generations learned? Nothing about those values and principles because you're not allowed to talk about them. So that's what's happened in society. And that was never the case.
That's a great point, though. But can we teach? That is missing value. There is a set of underlying values that I believe almost everybody shares in their heart.
Yeah, I agree.
And you could, is there a way to put that in the education system that's not from a religious standpoint, but things that help contribute to a positive way of looking at the world and a way of treating people, right? It has not, and remove God from the equation, because that's obviously the controversial thing when you start teaching religion in schools. Okay, but what are we really trying to get at? And I guess that's part of where we keep kind of coming around here is like, are we talking about God from a Christian sense, or are what we talking about really a set of values that people need to understand that exist, and people can see things from one set of values versus another set of values that they both believe, they just prioritize in a different way.
I agree. And what happens is, if you try to teach godly principles and values, then you can't go as far enough to say, oh, but this is Christianity, or Christianity teaches this also. So you can't say that. But the schools are trying to teach, oh, be good to your neighbor, be nice, care about this, don't bully, don't do this, those are all good things. The problem is, by staying away from where that comes from, forces them to actually, demonize religion and Christianity.
Yeah.
Because you can't say that's where it came from. That's where it comes from. That's human nature. That's how we've been for 6,000 years, or how many years you think. So
I wonder if you could do it if you put it in context with other religions too, and be like, okay, here's what the Jewish people think. Here's what Islam thinks. Here is what Christians think. And you lay it out and you say, here's what Taoists think. Here's what Buddhists think. Buddhist isn't technically a religion, but if you lay out all the commonalities that bring all these things, they all really do come from the same compassionate, heartfelt loyalty, gratitude. Like the lessons are all like the same. So I'm starting to even miss what people are even arguing about, because and I guess that's part of my discovery process. In this, I don't think people are even arguing about the same things, especially when it comes to news. They read a headline and then they think this person's evil, and they're not even reading the policy, or they're not reading seeing all the other information that's available. They don't see the other side. They don't investigate the other side, right? They're in their own echo chamber, in their algorithm. So they're not going and actively seeking out what other people think and why. That takes a lot of effort. It's challenging to do that. Yeah, it takes time, dedication. You have to challenge your own belief systems, which is the definition of learning. Essentially, is challenging yourself to see and think or perform differently in some way. Otherwise, you can't learn anything if you never challenge. You're never challenged. So and some of this actually comes down to, what people even think is true.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying, people believe in goodness. Okay, for the most part, no matter what your background is or religion, we all believe in goodness. The problem comes when you need to use it for, again, political purposes, or for control. And it could be control on one side, where you're forcing your religion down someone's throat, or control from the other side, saying there is no religion and there is no God. And so either side makes it so that it's difficult for people to come together, even with similar beliefs of goodness. And but again, that's where it's happened. But then you look at the different cultures. The cultures over in you got over in the Middle East. That culture is so different than ours. There's a culture there that it's actually a good thing if you lie to somebody, get away with it, or things like that. That goes back, thousands and thousands of years. And but then again, what about the penalties for doing something? Look at the penalty for homosexuality in the Middle East. They'll kill you for it.
Yeah.
So we have commonality, but then you've got culture or politics of the rulers that then come in and and bastardize it, or they change it so that it's hard to get unity because they've taken a good thing and they've gone too far. So, and
Right.
that's where the whole problem is. You don't go too far. Just love your neighbor as yourself. Period. I don't know how much more that could be.
Yeah.
But that's
Well,
not what happens in the powerful, or those that are extreme, or those that want to be controlling somebody.
Right. Well, you make a really good point there, and the Middle East on homosexuality is a really interesting thing, and I think there is a tendency to think that all conservative or religious people of various faiths, or particularly Christian, I think, in this country at least, are take certain stances against things and say one is rights for homosexuals, the other is environment being important, and I've found that that's generally not the case. There's an extreme view, like, okay, being responsible about our climate shouldn't be a thing at all. Like, I've never heard anyone really say that. There's a priority that climate takes in the order of importance of things, and how important people think it is versus other issues. And but I haven't, and the idea of homosexuality, again, like all Christians or all conservatives believe that should be illegal and you don't get rights and you shouldn't be able to do what you want to do here. And of course,
that's not true. That's not true. The extreme.
No, that's what I'm saying. The extreme viewpoint is that, but that's the problem with the categorization, because I think the rhetoric around, especially even in California, of conservative Republicans from Texas are like, those people fit in those categories, those extreme categories, and it's wrong. It's wrong.
Well, and that's a problem. Well, you wonder, why can't we get along? Because people do that. Right. People do that, and so what happens? I don't want to get on the homosexual stuff, because we have all those bills in Texas, and I know all that stuff. But the point is, it's your choice. You do it. It's your choice. I mean, it's not. No one should be telling you what you can and can't do. The problem comes when you want special legislation for you because you want to do a certain way. So it takes both sides. One side I'd say, okay, it's my choice, but why should I get something special? We could pick out another very small group of people and give them something special, but they don't have the voice and the activism and the special interest and all that stuff that the homosexual community have, the LGBTQ has. So, but then the other side has to realize, okay, guys, we need to treat everybody as God's creation, and nobody's better than anybody else, and we're not the judge. Okay, and so it takes both sides, but the problem is we don't have both sides doing that. Just because everyone claims that the conservative Christian side, they're the ones that are wrong. No, the other sides are wrong too, And again, and how do we get together? We don't. If you're gonna be that way and not love each other, again, it comes right down to the basic: love one another. I mean, as you would like to be, and treat others like you'd like to be treated. How could you go bashing or do something to somebody that has a different lifestyle than you, as long as they're not hurting you, as long as they're not breaking the law, as long as they're not interfering with your private property? Right. Why should you be rude or mean to somebody?
Yeah,
that's what happens. Well,
but that seems like a fundamental value that I would imagine everyone would agree on.
Sure, but
why don't we start conversations with that?
Amen. I do that on the House floor. I do that on the House floor in Texas. Yeah. I just said that exact words on the House floor, and we have a lot of gay and lesbian legislators, and all sorts. It doesn't matter. It's not everyone wants to attack the person. It's not the person. You look at policy, sure, but you never attack a person. And again, everyone keeps asking, how can we get along? Well, you're not going to get along if our legislators and our people in control, whether it's in city, county, state, federal, they're controlled by the money from their special interest groups or their activists. And they are actually, a lot of them are put in position so they can be activists for a certain position. So when you have that, you're not listening to the people, you're listening to the people that put you there and are paying you to be there. And
Is that
that's
the
again
biggest
the biggest
problem with
problem
politics?
is
That's
money.
the biggest problem. Yeah.
Oh, by far. Oh, definitely by far. You're not your own person because now it's so easy to be in the legislature once you get, and it's hard to get there, but once you're there, it's very easy to be there as long as you sell out because you don't really have to come home and work. You don't have to be part of your community. I mean, you could be in DC, or I got people in Austin, legislators, they basically spend most of the time in Austin and not with the people. And that's not how our government was started or our constitution was written. But that's how it works. And again, who has the voice? The voice comes from the money.
Man, it's like the same old story. Just follow the money.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I actually think that this is another unifying factor. I do believe that, and at least in my conversations with varying politicians on both sides of the aisle and people on both sides of the aisle, that most people agree. If you follow the money, you'll get to the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But
that's a general rule for the most part, right? But if you start to, there's certain conflict points that it seems that if it comes, for example, to something, maybe Trump said, right? This is a fun one, but there seems to be this thing like, if Trump said it, then I can't even question nothing else matters.
Mm-hmm. True.
Right.
Well, because it's all personality. Then when you ask that same person, what did Trump do that you don't like, policy wise or for the country?
Yeah.
They usually they can't say anything. Oh, I just don't like him. Oh, he talks ugly. Sure he does. I mean, who doesn't agree with that?
But the same thing happens with Biden. I see the same thing the other side with Biden. It's like if it's something that the leadership around the encapsulating powers of all of these issues start to discuss, then they can't align to it, even if they know that media's headlines are meant to get you to click and sell advertisements. They know that there's a money interest involved in this, that there is an underlying interest. And if you understand owning businesses, how money works, like, that doesn't mean that there's not ethical businesses out there, but you'd think that they could see past that. And I see on both sides of the aisle, it doesn't really work that way. It feels as if they're ignoring that. Both sides ignore some of those fundamental pieces of information that help us get to the bottom and root causes of problems. And we would align on that rationale, but we don't actually do it in practice.
Well, we don't, but you saw a great example 2 weeks ago of how it should be in practice, how it's supposed to be from our Constitution, from the beginning of our country. That speaker battle was phenomenal. And who won? The people won. But if there wasn't those 5 people that had the courage to stand up against the most powerful government in the world, and the speaker being the number 3 most powerful person in the country. If those 5 people didn't have the courage to do that, none of that would have happened. And again, I'm grateful because we went against our own party, and it was great. And because of the courage of a few, and it had to be the right timing, they had to have leverage. And they had to leverage because we only took 5 people to stop it. If it had taken 30 people, say the Republicans had swept and got all the seats they thought they were going to get, and we had a 20 or 25 seat majority, that would never have happened. That speaker, our speaker, would then have just come in and said, okay, I'm going to do what I want to do and what all the money people have told me to do. And I don't have to be accountable to anybody. But because 5 people stood up, he now had to be accountable to what they wanted. And what they asked for was, how about a term limit bill? Who doesn't agree with term limits? But we never get one because they don't have to do it. They'll just lie about it. How about reading a bill takes 72 hours before you could vote on a bill? give you 72 hours to read it. Not like the $1.7 trillion omnibus that was given to them that night to vote on so they could go home for Christmas. I mean, you want
I'll
to
add
see
one
some
more. How
stuff?
about you have to read the bill? You have to
Well,
actually read it. You're required
sure.
to read the bill.
Well, you got 72 hours now. You don't have to read the bill, but you got 72 hours at least to read it. And then there was a number of other things that we forced our Republican speaker to do. That's how things should be. That's how you make change. You don't make change these other ways. You don't, you can't, now you can't do anything to the speaker. He's already in there. So now there's no leverage. It had to be done at that time. So I learned a lot about strategy, leverage, timing, how to be effective. So people listening, you want to be effective in the legislature for whatever position you want, you have to strategize. You don't necessarily have to have money. Money obviously helps tremendously, but if you strategize and you find leverage somewhere and timing, there's can be huge changes. So we made huge changes, and it was our Republican speaker didn't want any of these. They didn't want any of these things. They like to have their little club, and he had everything all planned, and all the excuses are there why we can and can't do something, and they're all going to parties together, the Democrats, Republicans. It's a club. But boy, 5 people stood up, 5 with courage, and we changed the government for the good of Democrats and Republicans. And as I said, the Democrats shouldn't have let it happen. They gloated and thought this was a great thing, making the Republicans look bad. Boy, they missed the whole thing. All they needed was 5 Democrats to not vote or to vote present. And McCarthy would have been speaker with no concessions. The longer it went, the worse it was for the Democrat Party because more concessions were being agreed to. I mean, they didn't think they missed the whole point because they were gloating that it looked like it was chaos. No chaos. In fact, the Republicans are more unified than ever, because in government, those people never talk to each other. The leadership just runs the whole show and keeps you out of everything if you didn't sell out. So there's no discussions, there's no talk. In Texas, the same way. I'm a legislator. I don't get a chance to talk to leadership unless they allow me to. I don't get to talk to any of these, these major committees or budget committee or whatever, because they don't want me. They don't want to hear what I have to say. But he had to listen to at that time because those 5 courageous people, and it was a great thing for the country. It was just a great thing for the country, for the American people.
Yeah. Well, so that is a good perspective on what happened. I don't think, and I bet you that's not how a lot of the people in California, and I say in California, but we'll call it the far left or moderate left, even perceived that event.
But
right?
if they hear what I just said,
maybe they'll think
they did not want a single one of those concessions.
Yeah.
So at every vote, if it went 25 votes, it would have been even more concessions that they didn't want.
Right.
But the people want them, but the legislators don't want them because they're not being, the people aren't who they are controlled by. They're controlled by the special interest groups and the lobby groups that give them money. It's not by the people. There's some people, and they vote for them, but there's not enough people that are educated or informed. So these people that have been there a long time, that's why we need term limits. They're going to get elected no matter what.
And that's another thing everyone agrees on, right?
Right.
The lobbying and this issue, the special interest groups. Why do you think that it's so difficult to stop that connection so that people can vote and act more responsibly, ethically, and maturely?
That's human nature. That's man's heart. Man's heart, unfortunately, is greedy. And so if you get elected, I mean, it's hard to get elected. And when you're running for office, You're promising anything you can to any group you can to try to get elected. Just need votes. Then you get there, and then, you realize, hey, why should I buck the system? Just sell out, do what I'm told. And the special interest groups, they would just take care of me and just pay me. And so it's really a choice of the legislature. And so, like for me, I didn't have that much pressure when I got elected because they knew who I was. I ran a certain thing and I kept my word on everything I said. And they knew, well, I can't convince Kyle. We're not going to turn him, so I'm not going to put pressure on him. But the other legislators that came in with me, the majority of them turned within a week. They were just sold out within a week.
Yeah.
And so it's really not it's a choice of when you become a representative. Are you a representative of the people, or you're a representative of Austin or DC? Okay. And then secondly, people say, oh, well, it's all it's all the politicians' fault. They're all politicians. No, it's not. The people voted for them. You can't get there unless you voted for. So if you want to complain about how politicians are, it's only the people. They're the one that voted them in. They can't get in by themselves.
Yeah. Well, in the people's defense, sometimes you don't get a great choice.
Well, that happens sometimes, but the problem is especially when you've been there so long, it doesn't matter. You have a choice. It's already rigged.
Yeah,
you're an incumbent. You're an incumbent. You're going to win.
Well, it's why more people need to get involved. Also, I believe,
yes.
Like if you want, people can complain all they want, and I can personally testify to my experience of getting involved and being able to create something that you want to see in your community. And I think people don't realize that they can't just change the federal government. You have to start local, for example. And maybe you can become a local commissioner or a local council person or a local chair of your club. And then you can see if you want to take it farther. But there's a little bit of this idea that that if you complain about federal policy, you're going to make a difference. And the difference is to be made at the local level. And if you can get involved, then you can start talking to those people to influence them on what the right decision is. So you can actually do it, but it starts smaller than you, right? And I don't think not enough people get involved. And that's one of the things.
I know that.
Right?
I did it from nothing. So it's all about being, how many, what the percentage of people are that actually affect or control an election? It's less than 10%. It's about 7% of the people control an election for your area, for your district, or for your community, because those are the only people that really get involved. The other 90% don't even know what's going on. They don't even really.
Kyle, people in Santa Monica think that Karen Bass is our mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone, but a large percentage of people that I speak to, and it's like, Karen Bass is not our mayor. She's the mayor of Los Angeles. Santa Monica is a different entity.
We want to know something even worse. So I live in a town of 10,000 people. I've been here 38 years. I run the hardware store. And so I know a lot of my customers. So now that I'm back from Austin, and I'm in the store more often, people come in and say, "Oh, Kyle, man, you did such a great job. I'm so glad you're there for us." And I said, "Well, I didn't run again this time." "Oh, I didn't know that." "Well, we had 2 elections. My name wasn't on it for 2 elections for state representative in a little town of Fredericksburg, in my hardware store, that people know who I am. They know my name. They know everything."
Yeah.
And they didn't even know I didn't run. So who did you vote for?
But it's because, I believe it's because it doesn't sell, right? It doesn't make it to the algorithm. The stuff that you're going to click on that makes money is going to be the stuff that is apocalyptic, that feels like the world is becoming a terrible place, or the world is someone's going to take over. It's a lot of the fear-based nonsense that at that level makes a difference, but there's nothing that you're going to do about it today anyway. So sometimes I tell people, I'm like, why do you even watch the news? Because it's only giving you anxiety. And while you should know what's going on, you sort of have to tell yourself, like, that's out there. Like you're not adding anything to the equation. So stay
Mhm.
local. Stop focusing on that stuff. You can focus on the real stuff. Learn how the energy works in your city, and the recycling and the water, and what you could do to make it better, and improve the processes and save the city money. Or, there's so much you could do. You clean up your own neighborhood, your backyard, trash on your lawn, trash on the street. You can do so much.
Mhm. Everything starts local. There's no doubt. Everything starts local. And the only problem is when you start local in politics, you start that whole selling out thing and trying to be popular and trying to have everybody like you. And then you get into the club, and then you want to be in the club, and then it just keeps pushing you further away from the people. It's very hard because of man's nature, to not succumb to that. So
How
for
have you not
myself,
succumbed to that? How have you dealt with that? Because as a state rep, you're probably in at least one or two of these clubs. So how do you know that? How do you keep the sense of value, or keep your values in line when those pressures happen?
because I go against my own party. I mean, I'm not going to play the game, and I'm not there to be liked. In fact, I would tell people, I'm not going there to make friends in Austin. I got lots of friends back home. I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to fight for you guys. And if that means I'm not going to be liked up there, I won't be liked. And again, it just comes down to who are you as a person. And I went there, and you got to start it right away. It's hard to come back. So all these people that I know that were really good people campaigning, and oh man, they were on fire to do all the things that they said they would do in their campaign. And then they sell out. It's hard for them to come back. But the problem is they're already in the club up there, and they're going to get reelected most likely because the club is going to make sure they get reelected, and they'll go against anybody that goes against them. So it's pretty much an incumbent protection plan, where the incumbents are pretty much made sure they're going to be there. That's why we have term limits with the voting booth, but unfortunately that's not working right now for a lot of the reasons we've talked about. So I believe we need term limits until we get things back under control and people understand what the reason for being a legislator is. But you got people. I mean, look at the people. It's not just California; it's every state. You got Pelosi, you got Feinstein. They've been there their whole life, and look how much money they're making off of the people and their whole family. I mean, it's just, and they keep voting for him. Why do they vote for him though? Because, oh, I got you a bridge. Oh, I got a community center in your area. Oh, what do you need? I'll put pork in a bill to make sure you get what you want. So you think I'm doing a good job for you. While who's paying for it? You're paying for it anyway as a taxpayer. Mm. And so we keep voting for those people just because they gave you something.
Yeah. And also I know I've learned that a lot of the money that you even raise as a politician, a lot of it goes to the party that you're associated with, right?
Well, in DC. In fact, you want to be a committee, it costs you X. And then you also have to raise money for the Republican committee or the Democrat committee. So there's different ways. In Texas, I didn't, but if you want to be part of the club, yeah, you're going to raise money for the club. I don't want to be part of the club. I had no desire to.
So they don't. So if you don't raise money I guess if you don't, I think it is in California. There is some degree where the state reps have to give to the Democratic Party if they want to be on their.
That's right.
Materials or whatever. So, and that helps keep the machine going. Now they have the biggest marketing engine, and they keep you in essentially, right? So,
of course. Yep.
So if that's the case, and that gets the word to the most amount of people, it's sort of like self-perpetuating machine that once you get in and you have a commitment to the group, to the club, it's easier to stay in.
Of course, because they make sure you're there because they know they have you. Yeah. The last person they want in there is me. But we're very effective. People say, "Oh, how many bills did you pass?" Well, the bills that I passed, I gave to somebody else to pass for me because I'm going to vote for them anyway. So who cares if my name's on it? Because they weren't going to let me do it. But we're effective by adding amendments or killing bad bills or keeping our leadership accountable. But again, uh, it all comes down to do you are you going to do what's right no matter which party it is? Okay. So obviously, I don't agree with that much stuff on the Democrat side, but there's a lot of things. I did more environmental bills for water, clean air, density than any other rep in the state of Texas. In fact, the Democrat representative right next to me, who is the biggest environmentalist and the biggest climate change, the biggest everything. That was her whole platform. She wouldn't support my bills. And and my bills were affecting her county, her district. Why wouldn't she do my bill?
Why do you think? Why do you think?
Because she didn't like me.
Yeah.
She flat out said, I'm not going to help. I'm not going to do your bill because I don't like some of your other bills.
Yeah.
So I didn't run this time. So what is she doing? Now she's coming to me. And my policy advisor, who was from the EPA for 40 years, I was so blessed to have this guy. Now her staff and her are coming to me asking for our bills so she can file them this year. But again, it just comes down to it's just unfortunate. It's all personality. It's when it becomes personality versus policy. So we can work together.
Gets in the way too. And ego gets in the way too. It's almost like there's certain bills that you'd think, well, if it's, let's just say, an environmental bill, I'll eject from this particular case, but in general, like the individual wants to pass it themselves, right? You see this I've seen this with in different ways, even at the local government, where like there's certain things that could be done because it was a certain idea of somebody, but they'll hold off on it because they're in control of it and wait until it goes away so they could do it themselves and put out the press release. And there's an egoic sense of that. There's a feeling of accomplishment that comes with like the work they want to do. And that needs to be what goes out there in the public, that they did it. So if someone else does it, it takes away from their whole vision of how they see themselves or what their messaging should be like. That, oh, if someone else did it first, then be like, well, why didn't I? People may ask, well, why didn't you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Why did Kyle do it, not this other person? That's crazy. He's a conservative Christian. Mm-hmm. He shouldn't be passing environmental bills.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, you're exactly right. Ego. Again, it all comes down to, we talked about the values at the beginning of the show. What are your values personally? What kind of standard do you have? Do you love your neighbor as yourself? Where's ego in that? There's no ego there. But you get up to it doesn't matter if you're city council, your county commissioner, it doesn't matter, all the way up to DC. And it happens in Texas all the time. That ego thing gets in the way. And I got to have my name on it or whatever it might be. And I mean, it gets ugly.
Authorship.
It gets so ugly. I mean, it just gets ugly. And so I just gave them away. I didn't care, and then of course, I didn't get the credit, but I know. Mm-hmm. And I voted for it. So, hey, I voted for that, even though it was my bill, So it's all good. Again, it still just comes down to, what would you do, Evan? What would you do if you were a state representative or a senator? What would you do? How would you handle yourself? Would you be part of the club? Would you sell out? You got to really ask those questions to yourself. And, it's really hard. The pressure is tremendous. And it's a cool gig, man. It's a cool gig. Yeah. And then when you get to a place like where Pelosi and Feinstein are, look at the power and the money and they get invited everywhere. And they're just, if whatever they want to do, they could get to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah. I mean, you want to go meet the Prince of Saudi? You make a phone call and you go meet the Prince of Saudi. You go sit in his palace and have a Saudi
they take
coffee.
Those trips. Yeah, you want to get on the committee that does foreign affairs or do other things. So you travel the world. I mean, it's just that's how it works. So
but that's again, the pressure. That's the privilege and the pressure that comes with, right?
Right. So I'm asking you, but then everybody listening, ask yourself. You're voting for these people that darn well what they're doing, you don't agree with, or you think is not the right thing, or isn't really has the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know that that's not there in those people, but you're voting for them. What would you do? Would you do what they did? Would you become what they've become? Just because you got a bridge, or just because they came to your club and they shook your hand and said, "Oh, wow, George, man, you're a great guy, man. Thank you so much for getting involved in that community project." And then you put the picture on your wall and you tell everybody how great. Oh man, look who I met. I mean, this is just so superficial.
Yeah.
What would you do if you were there? And that's not it's an easy question, but we're voting for what we wouldn't be, or what we think we wouldn't do.
And it's hard to even put yourself in the position of the pressures you don't understand. And there's no way to understand what those pressures are and how you would experience them until you're in that position. So it's one of those things where you almost have to have some humility of what you don't understand. And that basic understanding is like, you are just simply not in that position. You're not a senator or a state rep, assemblyman, a congressman, whatever it is. You're not that person.
Mhm.
So you just don't know what that role looks like or what it's possible. And, I guess part of why I'm doing this is to even uncover some of that so people can understand what those real aspects are of being in that role, so that maybe they can have a little more humility and more empathy where it's needed. And maybe reduce the animosity and the toxicity to say, hey, we're all people. We all do need to love each other. This is crazy. We're getting caught up in nonsense. We're getting caught up in storytelling, narrative, and like we're not even talking apples to apples. We're arguing about apples to oranges.
And what I would suggest, and this is what I try to do, but I don't get the opportunity that much. Say you're talking with somebody that, say you're a Democrat, say you're a liberal and you're talking to or conservative, whatever. Why don't you just talk about the stuff you agree on? Stay away from the other stuff. I mean, you need to talk about things that you do agree on. It's important to talk about policy and politics. It can't be no politics, no religion. We're never going to talk about that. You hear that a lot too, but that's a cop out. Why don't you just say, okay, hey, what kind of things do we both agree on, or that are really important to us? Sometimes if it's important to us, then of course that gets you away too. But what can we agree on? Hey, let's talk about, hey, why don't we do something together and show other people this is how you get along? And you start with one thing and you never know how to grow. But we're in our corners and we don't ever come out.
Yeah. And I had the opportunity of chatting with Pete Peterson, the Dean of Public Policy at Pepperdine, who had a similar take on that around actually, and I think I may have alluded to something like this earlier, which was like to start opening meetings with those things you agree on, to take that time and open that way. Don't come in with the first thing of like, here's a problem that's controversial. Let's talk about it. And first, you have to warm up to getting into that space. So
everyone gets on the defensive right away. If that happens, you get on the defensive right away. Everyone's hair curled, and then you can't even get to good stuff later.
That's right. Exactly. You can't start that way. So, hey, maybe this show can encourage some people to take that action in their own meetings or in their own rooms of tough situations, and try to make things a little lighter and a little more vulnerability, humility, empathy, and get to see eye to eye, just so we can get to solutions faster. That's, at the end of the day, you want more of the things we want quicker, that are fair and that make people feel like they're being thought of. And,
and I got to say right now, so I told you the story about the representative in the district right next to me. What's my response going to be to her on what she did to me last session? I mean, all of her groups were in favor of my bill in her district. All of the environmental groups, they came and testified for me, and she voted against it. So what do I do? And so it's hard for me right now. This is very difficult. Should I help her? And I'm going to help her. I mean, why not? That's what I started. If she can get it through, it's going to help me anyway, because that's what I want for the hill country of Texas is beautiful. We need to protect it.
It would also show, I think it would also show that you're bigger than the stuff we talked about, the money, the ego, the power, right? And that if you, and I don't know all the details of this, but just from what you're saying, that if you did that, it's because it's the right thing to do, because you know it's a good bill, and you can put the ego stuff aside. And you know what? It's amazing how much you can accomplish when you don't care about the credit, right?
Right. And see, and it all comes back to what we talked about in the beginning is that's how we come together. Just think how, I mean, she's going to be so happy. She'll actually want to be able to talk to me. The groups will come together. Everyone will come together. If the two power people at the top would come together.
Yeah.
It'll affect all these people in the communities. And so that's, again, it's not, it's, I don't know any other way. I really don't. After being in there, seeing what's happening, seeing how bad it's gotten, if we don't come back to these, basic golden rule thing in our lives that we all agree on, treat each other right, then, that's about all we really have.
That is a perfect way. I don't think there's anything else that can follow that last line that makes sense for today. I think that is a perfect closure. I'm very grateful that you took the time to be here and explain this in a thoughtful way and in an authentic way. And want to let you know that I appreciate that you're doing that. And I think the world needs to hear these words. Mm-hmm. And
thank you.
Yes. So thanks for doing that. And hopefully even, again, Carol, a lot of people in California will hear this and maybe realize that there's more that we have in common than we don't. So
thank you so much. Appreciate the time, Evan.
It was my pleasure. I'll talk to you soon and enjoy the rest of your day and your evening.
Thank you.